Shalom, shalom, family. How y'all doing this day, man? I hope everybody can hear me. This be y'all brothers out going being y'all strong. Y'all know what it is. Coming at y'all with another lesson. This time, man, it's gonna be fitting of the season, man, which we know is past. And most time with it, man, we'll try to make a connection to show how we, supposed to commemorate this day, this most glorious event, that took place when our forefathers were being brought out of Egypt. And this is what we are commemorating. The first of the year, every year, culture is being Hebrew Israelites. So without further ado, man, we're going to give our praise, honor, and glory to the Father. We do so in the name of the Son, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. And before we go any further, people, please hit that like button. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. It won't cost you nothing but a push of the button, man. You ain't got to come out your pocket. You ain't got to come out your mind. You ain't got to give up your wife. None of that. And this push of a button and support us, man, so we keep this thing going. The more people that this information reaches, the more we're able to put out more and more and more and more information about us, being Hebrew Israelites, our enemies, those who sojourn amongst us, and keeping those commandments and faith in the beloved Son and enduring this mess that Satan got going on our planet. So, without further ado, man, let's get into it. Let's see what we got here, man. We're gonna be dealing with this second Exodus. As y'all can see, the title of the lesson is the second Exodus, from the rivers of Babylon to the shores of the Americas, right? And what we're gonna be doing here in this lesson is showing you the prophetic parallel, of those our ancient fathers, who lively and actively, partook in this incident, in this occasion. We're going to connect with us today to show you how that, no matter how much people may try to change and, take our identity and stuff like that. When it comes to the prophecies, if they don't fit those prophecies, it's not talking about them people. So, as we know, the story of the Passover is not just a past event. For the descendants of the transatlantic slave trade, it's a prophetic miracle. Check this out. When we go to Deuteronomy 28, chapter 28, verse 68, excuse me. Foretold a specific judgment, disobedience, right, to his people. Oh man, I just got to be working out, y'all back with me. I'm still kind of pushing out a little heat, man. Okay. Yeah, as Deuteronomy 28:68, this is a judgment for disobedience by certain people. And these people were the Israelites, the Most High chosen people. And he's saying in verse 68, the very last verse in this chapter, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, right? And we know from where they was at, ships wasn't needed, right? It wasn't needed. And, when we got where we was going, we was sold to our enemies, slave man, slave woman. The scripture gonna read bond man and bond woman. And seeing what a lot of people miss, or shall I say overlook, is the ship connection. Many Hebrew Israelite scholars and descendants, point to this verse as a direct link to the middle passage. Right? And of course, Egypt, it often refers to the literal nation. It also represents the house of bondage, which the Hebrew word would be Mitzrayim. Right? See, the use of the shift to return people back to the state of collective slavery. You know, it's the signature mark of the Israelites. I mean, it's plain upon tables right there in the history books. We can't get around that. Then, you know, we got to also look at the 400-year promise, right? You know, the Most High told Abraham his descendants would be afflicted for 400 years, right? And the end of it all will be delivered, great substance, right? So a lot of us, as history marks, you know, the 400-year slavery in America from 1619 to 2019. Of course, the whole entire, you know, chattel slavery bondage didn't last the full 400 years, but the affliction did. You know, with Jim Crow and segregation, the black laws, and, you know, the lynchings, and, you know, just all the deplorable things that these people were doing to us over here, you know. And, you know, 2019 was the 400-year mark, right? So as modern Passover season, or the time for the awakening is now. It's being a spiritual return as I speak. You know, the Israelites are constantly waking up, you know, here, there, everywhere. And the return is imminent because the Father, he promised that he would gather his people and put them back into their own land. Most High we'll get to that in this lesson, right? See, you know, a lot of misinformation, you know, had been put out there about us and who we are, right? But if you notice, within all this misinformation, it never puts out where we're really from. It just ain't out, right? But you know, you can connect, you know, the people to their place of origin just through history and say archaeology, right? But you know, the tribes wasn't lost; they was hidden, and then you know, prophecy had to be fulfilled. You know, regarding certain things that concern them, and one of those things, probably the main thing, was their identity, right? So you know, so we have to go back to the very last stop we were at before we got here. And when we go to that stop, we're going to find ourselves in that stop. So how did the Israelites who reside in Jerusalem get up way on the West Coast south? You know, but you know, the historical documents and oral traditions suggest that before the slave trade, a lot of Israelite groups, many Israelite groups migrated from Jerusalem through what's called the Sahel or Sahel, spelled S-A-H-E-L or S-E-H-A-L. I think it's S-A-H-E-L into West Africa. And see, these are historical migrations. You can look these things up and see where these people went. And when they went into a lot of these, you know, African / Hamite nations, but that's the biblical name for them, Hamites. You know, some of them assimilated, some of them had forced to assimilate, and a lot of them, you know, were kicked out and continued to migrate to find they settled on the West Coast. Right? But anyway, so you got oral traditions of groups like the Limba, which is Southern Africa, right? And you know, various communities, you know, like the Igbo was in Nigeria and Ghana, which maintained their certain, you know, were Hebrews who fled Roman persecution in AD 7. That's when they come straight point blank range with it, right? And settled along the coast of the Niger River, which we know was the slave coast when we look at the 1747 Emmanuel Bowen map. Right? Shows it clear as day. And maps from the 17th, 18th centuries, such as those by the brother I just mentioned, the cartographer I just mentioned, Emmanuel Bowen, label regions like West Africa as the Kingdom of Judah. Sometimes you see it spelled Wida, Whydah, Wida, right? Which it all means the same thing, because when you look at other maps, contemporary of his, it got the same thing. In other words, it's not a misspelling or misplacing of words and like that. They actually meant what they wrote, So so this suggests that the people taken in the transatlantic slave trade were not just random captives, right? but the remnant of Israel scattered into the four corners of the earth, like the Bible said. Right? And you got scholars that attest to this. Most High we'll get to that too, right? But we still talking about this Passover, right? Which like when the ancient Israelites observed, we got to visualize how they observe Passover. Though this is where commemoration comes in at. We must look, beyond this modern European traditions, just and go to the urgent, raw commands of Exodus 12, right? Which we know it speaks about, eating in haste, which they ate with their loins girded, their sandals on their feet, staffs in their hands. That's clearly stated in Exodus chapter 12, verse 11. Right? The meal, it was a meal of readiness, on the go meal, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, for us today, it's translated to, at this point, a mental excellence, being spiritually prepared any moment to lead a system of oppression, man. Turn it back to our true identity, which this is what you see now. Right? So, we got the spiritual excellence, from this, much as I hate to say it, with this Gentile state of mind into that true Hebrew state of mind, founded on true spirituality, coming straight from the Father by keeping his laws, commandments, and statutes, right? And it also, it's really kind of just take you to the step, basically, as to how to observe, Passover, like, the bitter herbs, right? Of course, in metaphorically, let me show you the symbology of this, right? Show you how you make the spiritual connections to this. You will see that it's about us. It's about the so-called black man over here in the Western Hemisphere, in the confines of the United States of America, right? So those bitter herbs that we partake in, that we eat, it's reminiscent, or should I say, reminding of, so-called black experience, right? They represent the literal bitterness, of the plantation, Jim Crow, and all the systemic seasonings, that attempt to strip away the Hebrew names and culture of us. All this stuff is meant to do. That's why the first thing they did was strip our name. We had afros and beard, which most of them did. They shaved our head and our face. They broke us down, man. Broke us from being men. Anyway, moving on to the next one. And the blood of the doorposts. A lot of us, we use what's called a surah, if I'm not mistaken. It's just the name, the carving of the Most High's name placed over the door. So I've seen some brothers, got it painted real pretty, But it represents the blood being over the doorposts, right? which, you know, when you really look at it, it was an opt-in clause, right? Which would signify the deliverance is not automatic, you know, based on DNA alone, or just because you're Israelite. But it was through an active choice, man, you know, follow the laws of the Most High and claim the protection of the Lamb's blood. So, you know, this thing goes deeper than what it appears to be, or what a lot of people know, right? So, you know, we look at the, you know, modern day relevance, you know what I'm saying? That's, you know, reclaiming identity, right? You know, Passover for the lost tribes in the West is recollection. You know, the word recollection, you know, recollection. So we're gonna be regathered, spiritually regathered right now. You know, once other prophecies take place and unfold, then we will see the physical aspects, you know, of these prophecies, right? So, you know, and when we look at, say, for instance, like the plagues that hit ancient Egypt, right? So, you know, the same plagues going to hit modern Egypt, which is America. And, you know, the greatest plague was not the physical change, but the loss of our identity. That was the greatest plague right there, right? So it's modern Passover, or should I say spiritual, you know, mental Passover. I say Passover from the dead Gentile state of mind and being protected. You know what I'm saying? You know, with this spiritual, you know what I'm saying, you know, state of mind, you know, that's Hebraic, right? You know, based on the laws and the Torah. So modern Passover, you know, it's about removing the leaven, the false doctrines, and European art history and all that stuff there, you know, so we can discover, you know, the true original Hebrew roots of the West African descendants, which is us. Yeah, which is us, right? So we just can't, you know, we got to see history, if it's true, is going to be consistent. In other words, you know, people over periods of time are going to pretty much say the same thing, you know, or attest to, you know, the same thing, you know, like, you know, you in college, your typological proof, you know, like a lot of scholars, you know, they know that the Passover is proved, you know, that God of the Bible still cares about his people, which is, you know, so-called black people here in the Western Hemisphere, especially those of us that are in exile, scattered to the four corners of the earth. So, you know, we heard the cries of our ancestors in Egypt. You can rest assured, he hear the cries from the urban centers here of America today. Yeah, he hear our cries, man. You know, and those of us who cry with a sincere heart, he hears. Man. You know, he will deliver. His promises do not come back void. His words do not come back void. You can rest assured of that. So, you know, in conclusion to this, man, we got to really reflect, you know, as we observe this past, and not see ourselves, talking about us Israelites, us blacks who are waking up. We're not black, blacks are color, right? But, you know, we must not see ourselves as strangers to this story. This is our story, right? We the protagonists in this here, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, being we the descendants, you know, the people who crossed the Red Sea and the people who survived the Middle Passage, that means the blood is still on our doorposts. We just got to recognize and acknowledge it, you know, and let the Most High do what he do. So Pharaoh let his people go, right? But yeah, that cry is still echoing, you know, through the halls of history, man, nobody will ever forget what he did in Egypt. See what I'm saying? So, people, like I say, this was just something quick, keep it fresh on your mind, man. Stay firm, stay strong, and, do what the Most High commands, man. And endure. We got to endure those temptations. And one of the strongest temptations we have to endure, and I've always said, is that temptation to not do when we're tempted to not observe the laws. So that's tempting within itself. So in other words, in our mind, our own negative self, talk tells us to, man, I got to cook you someday, man. We can't do that. We can't do that, man. So let's move on. I'll give y'all a little bonus. Right. Not really no bonus, but just to take it, because see, a lot of people, they try to say that the transatlantic slave trade is not prophecy, not Bible prophecy, but scholars, they don't feel the difference. They feel the difference with that, man. Because when you look down through the annals of history, man, ain't but one people went through that. And then when you look in the Bible, the Israelites never did go back into Egypt as a people, as a slave. So when did it happen? And what is it to this Egypt? Because we know they didn't need ships to go from Egypt to Israel or Israel to Egypt. So it has to be something deeper. Like traditional theology, they often, view Egypt, as a literal return to the nation of Egypt, right? In other words, they view it as a literal thing, right? Which it is. These scholars, they also argue that since the Israelites never returned to literal Egypt in mass by ship, then the verse, it got to be referring to the transatlantic slave trade. And of course, we know when we look at the Hebrew word for Egypt, Mizraim, means double straits, right? Or a narrow place. And it's used throughout the Torah as a synonym for slavery, right? Therefore, return to Egypt and ship is seen as a prophetic description of the Middle Passage. This is what the scholars are saying, right? And then, when you look at the cartographic evidence, maps, you see the kingdom of Judah mentioned, right? On West African coast, is supported by 18th century European cartography. Most notably the well-respected and renowned Emmanuel Bowen. He produced this map in 1947. And I mean, y'all forgive me, 1747, right? And he literally had it wrote on there big as day, Negro land. You know what I'm saying? And with explicitly labels of other regions, on the slave coast, which would be modern day Benin. He had that written down as Weta or Judah, which is the same thing. It's just Weta, just corruption of the word Judah, right? And then you got you got other scholars that has commentary on it, and like a lot of the mainstream historians, they argue that Judah is a European corruption of the local name, way down, right? That's what they say. And then you got your Afrocentric scholars and community leaders, that the Portuguese and French explorers of the time, they frequently refer to this specific area as the Kingdom of Judah or Judah, spelled Ajuda. And that suggests they recognize the Hebrew presence among the inhabitants who were enslaved. So I would suggest that, you go, study some of these so-called explorers, and a lot of the enslavers themselves got journals and stuff that they wrote stuff, what they witnessed, and so on and so forth, even what they did in these different journals, man. And you will see that, this stuff is true. We come from the people who were taken from that particular geographical location, which were the remnant of the Jews fleeing from Roman persecution in AD 70, right? And when you really go into this stuff like anthropological and genetic research on this stuff, especially when you're dealing with the Limba and the Igbo, say, you can't help but, like, say, because you got this one, he's supposed to be renowned anthropologist by the name of Tudor Parthy, right? He did some extensive research, and he can bridge the three gaps between oral traditions as well as science, right? Say, like the Limba tribe. His study of the Limba people in Southern Africa reveals that they carry a Cohen modal haplotype, what they call the Cohen gene or the Cohenine, right? So that's a marker found in the priestly gene, right? This is what these people have. So they don't know other, people have that, but the priest, right? And it goes, it goes to show, man, that, it's been a world conspiracy, man, to hide who we are, right? And to steal our identity. What's so cool about the Most High, he tells us right there in Psalms 83 what the conspiracy was. That the name of Israel be no more in remembrance. Right? Whether we remember it or the world remember it, it's to be no more in remembrance. So that raised the question, who are these people over there who are not calling themselves Jewish? Yeah, rabbit hole deep, people. Rabbit hole deep. But they confirmed that oral history of being Black Jews who not migrated from the north, man. That's who these people, the Igbo, the Limba tribe, but where they located at, Israel will be north of them. So this is what they say, that they migrated from the Black Jews. Who came from the north. But when you look at a lot of like a book called Hebrewism in West Africa, I think that's the name of it, by Williamson. I think that's the person. I got to go look at sites. When you look at a lot of the African customs, right? Like you got this one scholar, Remy Alana. This person wrote, kind of extensively on Igbo of Nigeria, right? They provide a commentary on how West African society practiced circumcision on the 8th day, even observed the dietary law, like eating no pork and any other unclean food that the Torah say don't eat, right? And not only that, they also follow lunar calendars, put the blood on the doorpost. All these rituals long before Christian missionaries arrived over there, right? And a lot of these scholars, they argue these customs are not similar, but remnant Hebrew practices. In other words, authentic. This is the real deal right here. This wasn't something similar to it, where one nation copied another. No, these people, they had the authentic, die hard, homegrown, truth to who they are and what the customs are, and so on and so forth, right? And then when you look at the historical aspects of the historical scholars, like one of the main ones, one of the ones that's raw and uncut with it, which is Mr. Rudolph Winslow. I got both his books, Babylon, Timbuktu, and Valley of Dry Bone. Okay, and Babylon, Timbuktu, you know, he provides the narrative framework on how these people arrived in West Africa, right? He called it the Great Migration. And in his commentary, he suggests that after the Roman destruction of the temple in AD 70, millions of Hebrews fled south into the east, central, and eventually west to West Africa to escape Roman persecution. And this who the Limbo say they descend from. They come directly from them. The people that fled Roman persecution. These are the same people that settled on the West Coast of Africa. Who we descend from. Those people that settled on the West Coast of Africa, Negro land was the ones who got caught up in the transatlantic slave trade. Right? That's just the result of it. Right? So by the time the transatlantic slave trade began, which a lot of these scholars argue that the West African coast populated nothing but black Jews. Right? And they had established kingdoms and communities, you know, making them primary targets for capture. These people knew who they were, right? They knew who they were. They knew they were Israelites. They knew they was God's chosen. So people, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up or kind of start preparing for this commemoration tonight, man, me and family. Hope y'all got something out this jewel, man. Stay strong, stay in the law, keep the faith, man, and do it to the end, man. It's wait on our king to come back. We have it on the wicked. That say shalom, people.